Alright. Let's get this guy on the road. Okay, welcome to a PowerPoint presentation of War of Attrition. This is an artillery strat guide made by Ferocity. So, why do we use artillery and why is it so fucking useful? Or useless, I don't know. Useful. Why is it useful? Alright, let's go for the concept War of Attrition. So, what is War of Attrition in Conqueror's Blade? So, in this scenario you see here, you have like the same units. This can be the defender, and this can be the attacker. So, this is War of Attrition because if you stand still and do nothing, it's a stalemate, right? So nothing will happen. So, and how do you win? Well, you can try to charge, but did you really win it? No, not really. So, War of Attrition. Introduction of ranged. So, who would win this battle? You give Namkhans on a enemy side, and then you give Pavis on this side. So, what Pavis excels at is that they kill a melee unit at ranged, which is good. I wouldn't necessarily kill shields with archers because that would be very ineffective. So you probably want to aim them maybe at the Pavis if the Pavis doesn't have shields. So what would happen is the Namkhan takes out the Pavis and the Pavis takes out the stalwarts maybe. And then what happened when you now charge? You have 3 units, range units. You lost your Pavis. They lost their stalwarts and they have like 2 units, so it's 3 versus 3. But this is an unfair battle because the line will probably not hold properly, and you will be left with like half a melee unit. Not an entire melee unit, but you would win it, like almost, but it's not a good. You didn't really win, you know. So let's take about the next scenario. So here we have 4 melee units, and then you have the 3 range units and the 2 holding units. So many people will think that, okay, these holding units, they're good at holding, so they will hold this point, and when these charge, they will just be stopped here, and the ranged can take them apart. But that's not really true, because you're doubling the amount of melee units you have here. So what will probably happen is that you trade one of your melee units for 2 of theirs, and now there's 3 melee units versus 3 range units. And yeah, you will probably have 2 melee units left, and everything else on the other side is lost. So what would this be? 4v5 victory. Is this satisfactory? You won a 4v5. Absolutely, this is great. This is absolutely great. So what does this have to do anything with artillery? Well, let's introduce the heroes. So again, you have melee heroes with melee units with melee heroes. What will happen? Well, you can charge, because there's no other way to battle each other, right? Or do you have maybe artillery? Small hint there, maybe. You can charge, but what will happen? Everyone dies. Did you win? Not really. So, before talking about the artillery, I already gave a tip, because you maybe don't want to charge here, you know? You might just put up some artillery and blast away, you know? If you have artillery and they don't, you will win. And it's risk-free to put down the artillery, because if you're actually going to charge here, you might be picked out, or you lose early and your units flee, and then it's suddenly, you know, a 4v6 because you just died early because you played it badly. So there's a risk to this. But standing in this position, putting down artillery and shooting at each other doesn't have that much risk unless the enemy has a ballista that can one-shot you with a headshot. So, before going in more details about the artillery, introduction of ranged heroes. So, what did we say before with the ranged units? What happens? Well, if you're waiting in this scenario, the musket will probably throw bombs at your units. Like it's a 40-second cooldown, so he throw 2 or 3 bombs, put some fire onto them, and some spikes, and they will die. And then you're fighting 4v spear. So waiting is very bad in this scenario. You should never wait when facing ranged heroes, obviously. But what if you have the perfect charge? Well, charging will lead to a win. If you are in this scenario and you charge immediately, it will lead to win. But is it worth it? And you might wonder why is this a win? Well, ranged heroes are always weaker to upfront damage. Like a spear will beat or kill units way faster than any ranged hero will ever do. So that's why charging is a winning tactic in this scenario. But is it good? Yeah. So how about charging against the full melee versus ranged heroes? Well, melee will always win if the melee heroes are competent enough to not get picked off. So melee always win. We can drag it because I put a second condition if the melee heroes are competent enough to get picked. So picked off. So there's a mention of skill. Like you have to be skilled to win the charge, because the ranged heroes can play this really well and do like what I said before. They can pick you off. They can pick you off very early, and you have to flee the battle, which make also your unit to flee after a while, which makes this fight obsolete. Then it's like a 4v6 and you lose every time. So let's talk about artillery. So what about artillery? How to think about artillery? Wouldn't it be nice to have an extra pavis for this scenario? Like, just put a couple of pavises down here, and then shoot at these guys. Yeah, you probably know where I'm going with this. Portable artillery. What's the advantages of this? Well, you can actually spawn the extra pavis. You can get an instant ranged unit on the battle. Ranged heroes doesn't really get much, but melee heroes can become momentarily ranged heroes. So this is the advantage melee heroes has over ranged heroes, because when you see this scenario here, when you are in like a momentary state, so in like a proper, what did they call it in the start? I called it attrition. So this is a war of attrition, right? You don't really want to charge them, because then you're going 1-for-1 and then nobody has any units on the table, which is very bad, because if you have no units, you can't take X. If the enemy doesn't have any units and you don't have any units, nothing really happened. It's like the same, you're in the same situation when everyone had all their units. The difference is only that nobody has units, so nothing changed. But also the idea that melee heroes can become momentarily ranged heroes. That changes this picture, doesn't it? Melee heroes are not forced to charge anymore. They can match the ranged hero in ranged warfare. So if you remember the first picture, waiting in this scenario is bad. Well, waiting, you can actually win, like or trade equally in this scenario if you put down an artillery piece. So even though waiting in this scenario is bad, artillery can make this scenario go equal, which is the strength of it. Of course, unless you're charge and you do this successfully. But then you also have the problem of this second condition. If the melee hero are not competent enough to not get picked off, yeah, it's more pattern of skill if you're gonna play um, pattern of skill if you're gonna play melee. So this is sort of the ideas behind using artillery in the right moment. So just to make some summary, I'll just go from the top. So disadvantages of charging. Everyone have to be organized and react properly to do it well. Like you have to charge at the same time if the charge gonna overwhelmingly win. But well, as it said for advantages of charging here, it's very strong and lets you win always. Always if done properly. So another disadvantage of charging is units who are better in stationary position are not allowed to fight in their best stance. So like a huge shield unit, which I have an example of here. This is not a charging unit. So they can't fight, they want to be stationary and fight in a stationary point. Also these. So you lose that advantage of the units. Yeah, hard to pull off along with friends or something like that. I didn't fill it out in. Whatever. Advantage of range. Well, advantage of range is abuse weak and disorganized enemies. Charging one unit into 4 ranged units is never smart because you're just feeding them. And range will take advantage of you waiting. So if you're scared or afraid or your team doesn't act, the range will always win. Another advantage of range is artillery makes melee heroes who excels in charges a momentarily ranged unit. So this is the main use of the artillery, if you ask me, because ranged heroes doesn't really need them, but melee heroes, oh wow, you can win. You get the advantage of abusing weak and disorganized enemies. You see? So disadvantages of range is it always loses when there are no holding units. So this is easy. Like if you don't have any units to stay around your artillery piece or your archers, you lose the artillery piece or your archers. It's that simple. It's disadvantage of range. You need something to block off. Just in like this scenario here. What do? It's probably just death for these Pavises and Namkhans. They will never win this scenario. So, advantage of holding units. Holding units, like shields, will also abuse weak and disorganized enemies because people don't charge properly to win to win the fight against shields. Like, it's easy to win over shields if you have, for example, a sword using ultimate and spread everyone's out, and then you charge into it with your paladins or whatever unit you have. So, and another advantage of holding units is they often can hold out till backup, not blackout, arrives and hold out, so range can deal optimal damage. So, and disadvantages of holding units: struggle to win against organized teams who charge properly. Like, you don't win. So here's a problem. So disadvantage of range: it always loses when there are no holding units. And disadvantage of holding units: it struggle to win against organized teams who charge properly. So this just, it's very strong and lets you win always, you know? Advantage of charging. Charging is best. So another disadvantage of holding units: can struggle against certain ranged units like Falcos and Pavis. Like, Falcos just destroy shields. So, any conclusional final thoughts? Well, play melee heroes, think as a ranged hero, and put down your artillery. Often I would just suggest to play as a ranged hero, so you always see, oh, this is an interesting spot to stay to shoot as a ranged hero. And these areas will also be good to use artillery pieces. Like, if you can stand in one point and shoot with your ranged hero, well, here is where you want to put the artillery piece when you're playing a melee hero. So that's it. Thanks.